Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mariah and I'm a Band 5 rotational physiotherapist. In the UK, I post physio-related content as well as lifestyle-related content. So if you're interested, subscribe, turn notification bell on, and never miss a video. So today, I'm going to annotate the person spec for this job in Worcestershire Acute Hospitals NHS Trust. So this is just the job description. It's a Band 5 rotational position, 7 days a week, and I highlighted one or two bits, but just so you could see them. So this just goes over what the job entails. That you'll be MDT working, which is obviously expected. That it will be both an inpatient and outpatient rotations will be involved in that. And then you've got that, like most places, is 7-day working. You'll have to be on call at points, and like I said, 7-day working, so you work weekends. I don't believe that in this job description it lists the rotations. I think it did on the actual initial job post, but it does not appear to do that in here. So let me just go back up to the top and let me double check. Okay, no it doesn't. So inpatient, when I think inpatient rotations, I think you're probably going to cover the typical ones, like maybe a stroke ward, something respiratory based. And then for outpatients, it will be like an MSK outpatient setting or even community. So anyway, let's hop over to the job. You got the job description, so let's hop over to the person spec. I've already annotated it. I'm just going to talk through my annotations. Okay, so here we have the person spec. So on the left, you've obviously got I'm going to circle them, what I'm talking about, so you can actually see me on the screen versus, I'm just going to circle with this. Okay, so here you've got the job requirements on the left. So you've got qualified, experience, skills, knowledge, personal qualities, other aspects, and then you scroll down, it's still the same as other aspects. Essential requirements are self-explanatory. So it's just things that obviously you need to have to then be considered for this job. Desirable are things that would be nice for you to have. It doesn't impact whether you get the job or not necessarily. Like, it doesn't, basically, if you don't have these desirable stuff, obviously you can still apply. That's what they're saying. But if you have them, even better. Like, you probably, I don't want to say you get more notice, you get noticed more, or you may be in more running for the position, because ultimately your statement and your application is obviously important, but your interview could also ruin it for you if you're not able to portray it yourself well in the interview. And then you've got methods of assessment. So it's basically telling you how they're going to pick up these details. So like you can see here, they're going to pick up the details in interview, portfolio, references regarding your experience, whereas your qualifications and training will just impact your application form. Personal qualities, obviously references. If you try and portray yourself in the interview or your portfolio as a great person, and let's say you're like, I'm caring and I care for everybody and I work at a local food bank, and then you say you get reference from said food bank and they're like, oh, she awful, she da 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 da, well, ain't gonna play off too well. Anyway, so we come down to look at qualifications and training first. So I assume because you're looking at this position, you are either a physio student or someone looking for a new position. So I imagine you already possess the degree. If you don't already possess the degree and you are a student, you most likely do not have your HCPC registration. Don't worry about that. As I said in the previous video, when I applied for my role, like my job that I'm currently in, I didn't have my HCPC registration at the time. Because I was still a student and I had a good few months left of my degree. When I was applying, I emailed and I was like, oh, do you take students? But that's what I did for other places, because the job I'm in and the trust I'm in, they were actually saying that they're open to people who are graduating in the summer. So I knew that me not having HCPC at that current time was understood. But the moment I got it, then that's all good. And in many cases, quite a few places will take you on under this role, but as a band 4, and then the moment your HCPC comes through, push you up to a 5. Members of CSP. Now, as a student, many people are. I have chosen not to continue as a qualified person with CSP, but that's up to you, really. So now, experience, obviously a really important aspect. So here I've highlighted this. Different ranges of experience from different specialities. I filled this all in as if I'm the one who's applying for it, because that's the easiest way for me to do it. So you've got experience in each core speciality. In regards to core specialities, that's obviously MSK, respiratory, and neuro. I personally would say I only really have respiratory. I did do neuro, mental health, and a disability placement, but I wouldn't say it's the type of neuro that they're traditionally looking for. So I would say I've only have respiratory experience, and based on talking to other people, it's pretty common for people to have gained neuro experience or versus, let's say, MSK outpatients. It really, usually people are missing at least one of the core areas. So being able to demonstrate a broad range of experience from different specialities is very important. So now along here, I've listed all my placements that I did. I did elective orthopedics, OPAL, so that stands for Old Person Assessment and Liaison. I did mental health, pediatrics, urgent care, and respiratory, mostly spent on ICU. ITU and ICU. So I would talk about my experiences within those different placements. Moving on to the next bit here, in terms of showing that you have experience within acute NHS trust. So this little blue dot that I did there, I've also done blue dots along here next to my placements to remind me of which placements I did within the NHS. Now, 5 of my 6 placements were within the NHS, but my mental health placement was in private healthcare. So I just have to drop a simple line being like, oh, when I was working, or I completed all my NHS, or I completed 5, or the majority, etc., of my student placements within NHS acute settings, blah, blah, blah. You can even say the name of the hospital and the trust if that's what you wish to do. You don't have to, but that's something you could do, and then go on from there. So you just drop a little, boom. You don't have to be like, this is this and that and that. You could literally just be like, oh yeah, I did it at this acute NHS hospital, a blip, blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? There's a nice way of dropping it in. This whole thing here, I've done here in terms of evidence of recent/relevant CPD. I've linked it also to active participation in audits or research, and I also linked it down to the skills, knowledge, desirable requirements in terms of teaching, leadership, and presentation skills. Now, for me personally, these all 3 link, and I can say they link in terms of with the evidence that I'm going to prove that I have those skills. So on every one of my placements, I had to do a case study, whether that be a poster or a slideshow or a leaflet. I had to do some form of work to present my knowledge and what I'd done. That's a form of CPD. Let me go back. So that's a form of CPD. But not only is that a form of CPD, it's a form of research, because I've done some research, and when it says a form of research, it doesn't necessarily always mean new research. It could just be like, I researched further into a topic and discovered these things and developed my own learning. And I taught other people. And in terms of leadership skills, several of those case study presentations that I did, I chose to do the case study presentation as a way to show my learning versus any other method. And obviously I presented that, so there's presentation skills. Anyway, going back up to experience here, we have training of other MDT members. So with this, what this means is basically gathering an understanding of what other MDT members have done, or do, and how your role intertwines. So I've written down my experiences. So on my second placement, I spent a day with the neuro OTs. My first placement was a nursing placement. So I spent time with the HCAs, spent time with the nurses, and I like basically stepped into, not necessarily the nurses' shoes, but stepped into the HCA's shoes. So I'd worked closely with them, and I am pretty knowledgeable about what they do. Psychology. So on my mental health placement, I spent time talking to the psychologist and understanding more of what they do and how they work with the physios. And then on my last placement, I spent time with the SALT team, so I got a better understanding of that as well, and their role, and how we do joint sessions. So those are experiences that I've had along the way in my training that I can talk about when I'm forming my personal statement. Moving down to skills and knowledge, the first pointer in the essential requirements is to be able to effectively and appropriately do written verbal communication skills. Now I've just written here SOAP notes because honestly, if you have any examples of your SOAP notes, that covers that all. Like, yeah, you could mention SOAP notes, but if they ask for your portfolio, which in here they will do, I would say, for example, on my pediatric placement, at the start of the placement, that was my first time writing respiratory notes. So at the start of the placement, my notes were a joke, in my opinion. They weren't great, but they were getting there. And then I also scanned a copy of my notes at the end of the placement, and you can see a big difference in that. I would advise, for the whole showing written and verbal communication skills, you could have a note, and in the note it could be like, obviously you're doing the SOAP formats, so that shows that you have those written skills. But in verbal skills, it just takes you jotting a sentence in those notes being like, handed over to Dr. blah, 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 because of this, blah, 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 blah. That shows that you have verbal communication skills. It doesn't necessarily have to be verbal evidence, you know what I mean? Or it could be like contacting next to kin and blah, 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 blah. That shows that you have those verbal communication skills. Now, in terms of evidence of appropriate personal skills, responsibility, like being responsible, flexible, and well organized. So for me, of those of you who may not know, I worked throughout my whole degree. That for me shows that I'm responsible. I'm flexible. I would say flexible because, one, working and alongside uni isn't easy, and another reason I would class myself as flexible and well organized is because I didn't work in the city I studied in. The cities were 2 hours apart, or 2-3 hours apart. So that takes well organization and flexibility to be able to do that. So I would bring in the fact that I traveled between the two cities on a weekly basis and how I managed to organize myself to get my uni work done. Now, evidence of effective team working you have here below. So I put MDT. You can draw back to these stuff up here. You can draw back to this and bring in how you worked with the team or how you had a discussion with the team on a case. They brought in their perspective, you brought in your perspective. Those are things you can talk about. And a range of clinical knowledge. So as always, they want you to have evidence-based practice. We practice based off, and we do things based off the evidence that is out there. I find, like, okay, I'm gonna give you another respiratory experience, like, reference. So for example, say you go in, you auscultate someone, and you hear crackles on their chest, but you hear like a wheeze. Reason why you may or may not do manual techniques. Me personally, I'd probably still do manual techniques. Well, not even probably, I would still do manual techniques because of the crackles. But then I would re-auscultate and hear if I've made the wheeze worse or not. If I made the wheeze worse, then I would stop. But if I made the wheeze better, basically if the wheeze like quietened, then I would proceed because I would continue trying to get rid of those crackles. And I'd explain why I can't do manual techniques on someone with a wheeze and be like, oh yeah, because blah blah blah. Like I'm not going into the whole full thing with you, but like you get where I'm going with this. Like that shows evidence-based knowledge. Again, you could do that with just having a good example of your SOAP notes. That analysis section will bring in evidence-based practice and cover you right there. Oh, okay, now awareness of current issues in the NHS. Just watch the news, bring up whatever you need to bring up. It could be, let's say, I brought up the fact that doctors were striking while I was on placement. That was a current issue at the time. It could be strikes, it could be trialing a new medication, it could be funding, it could be whatever. You could somehow drop it in there and maybe how it impacted you in your training. Personal qualities, I'm not going to go into that too much because it's self-explanatory how you would explain those, but I just said like you may use examples from uni work and everyday life. Don't feel like you only have to bring in physio examples. I brought in examples from all three of those different aspects. Now, other job requirements are, for this place, is, are you willing to commute between two sites? So one, I could either cover this by saying, I own a car, or I could cover it by being like, when I was talking about my flexibility, I could cover the commuting question when talking about flexibility just by writing a sentence saying, I worked alongside my degree, driving between two cities, blah, 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 blah. That basically implies that I'm open and able and willing to commute between two sites. If I'm willing to drive 2 hours between two cities, driving between two sites is nothing. You know what I mean? And then we've got willingness to do your hours over a 7-day working situation. So for me here, in terms of examples, I've got uni plus work. So what I was trying to hint at myself there with this annotation is that like maybe when I was working and I had uni, I didn't have a day off. I was doing 7 days. So working over the weekend or working later or working certain different times won't impact me as something I was accustomed to doing. So taking this role is no different. And that also covers the last thing in terms of the weekend rotating and 24-hour on-call service. But that is my annotation of this person's spec. Hopefully that helped you out a little bit. When I was applying for my job, I did exactly this. Went through, jotted down things. I jotted down specific examples for the specific areas that the rotations were in, and then formed it all into one to make my personal statement and get me that interview to get me this job. But I hope this was helpful for you guys, and if you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. If I get enough thumbs up, I'll know that you guys want another one of these, and that may be helpful. But yeah, I'll see you guys in another video.